My name is Clint Schroeder. I am the regional publisher and managing director for the North Idaho newspaper group. I work for the Hagadone Corporation. I live in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho. Political science. And I graduated from the University of Wyoming in 1998. While I was in college, actually, I was working for the Laramie Boomerang. I was an inside sales assistant back in those days, so working around my school schedule and processing film in the old dark room for our outside salespeople for automotive dealers and real estate agents. After I graduated, I went to work for a family-owned newspaper group, the Lehman Group, in the Denver market. Worked in Longmont and Loveland for a few years, and then another family-owned newspaper group recruited me to the Collier counties of Chicago, where I served as vice president of sales and marketing for several dailies, weeklies, business journals. From there, Gannett recruited me. Gannett, of course, is USA Today and some of the larger metro newspapers, especially back in those days, recruited me to go to Honolulu, Hawaii, where I served as senior vice president of sales and marketing for the Honolulu Advertiser, which was 150,000 circ daily back in those days. I was with them through 2010, and the Hagadone Corporation came knocking on my door. I became president and chief operating officer for their Hawaii holdings, which included magazines, commercial print, a couple of other publications. And in 2018, I made the move with, of course, the Hagadone, same company, to my current location, where I manage newspaper groups and associated media companies in the North Idaho area that cover eastern Washington state and the northern part of Idaho. Well, I sort of fell into the publishing business accidentally. I obviously was a political science student at the University of Wyoming and had originally intended to go on to law school, but I really loved the whole daily newspaper business and reaching a mass audience. So after I left the University of Wyoming, of course, the newspapers were still the monopoly media companies in all the communities that they served. And my first few experiences in companies that I worked for, it was really a fast-paced, phenomenal environment where we were reaching our audience with micro local economics news and information, our advertisers. So that has changed significantly. I got my master's degree later on and decided to stay on the business side of this industry rather than the journalism side, but had to learn both pretty quickly as I moved up through my various positions that I've held. I will say that technology's played a big role in the evolution of this industry within the last decade specifically, but the last 20 years definitely have seen some major changes. A lot of what I do now, my job is largely strategic, largely financial, but on the other hand, it still goes back to connecting local readers with local information. And those readers now, we count our audience in eyeballs, not necessarily number of newspapers that we put on doorsteps. So for example, our web offerings and all of our digital assets have become a much larger part of our business. In fact, about 20% of our annual budgets now come from digital assets like our various apps, our websites, of course, our e-subscriptions, which is just a digital representation of the products. We've diversified our portfolios to try to meet some of those missing niches in our markets, specifically with real estate guides. And we're in a beautiful part of the country, so tourism type magazines and those kinds of things. It's not just ink on paper anymore. It's all of those other venues and avenues where we reach the folks that are interested in what it is that we produce every day. So our journalism teams have also had to learn how to modify. For example, we were dabbling and have been for the last several years in podcasting in each of the specific markets that I work in. In 2021, we'll be taking our most successful group of podcasts and combining them and going more regional. So offering a more tidbit style podcast on a daily basis and longer shows that we produce now in-house that actually just kind of go through what's happening in North Idaho. A lot of our listeners on our podcasts are all over the world because they either have moved and relocated or possibly when they're traveling, but they can always stay caught up that way. And it's an easier way to consume that information if you're stuck in traffic. I think the most fun aspects of this is being with companies like I have. Most of my career, I've been with family newspaper groups that are a little bit more heavily resourced. They're not. I don't have Wall Street projections anymore since I left Gannett that I have to worry about on a quarterly basis. But one of the things that I think has been the most fun is being able to experiment in how we better connect our audience with the content that we provide. One of the things I think that becomes real obvious is local journalists cover micro local news and information better than anybody else. Knock on wood, hopefully, the rest of my career will just see that importance continue to grow. 2020, of course, has been such a phenomenally different and unexpected year for all of us. But what we found is our relevance is higher right now than it's ever been before. People are obviously exposed to national and international news from a myriad of different sources. But what they can't find from those specific sources is information about what's happening at home, what's happening with our schools, what's happening with our city councils. It always makes me happy to be able to feature local Rotary clubs and T-ball teams, and those kinds of things are not available with those major news networks. The most challenging aspect of my career for the last 20 years or so has certainly been the dynamic shift in how we consume information, starting with the major place that the internet has, of course, taken in all of our lives. We first saw those challenges, let's stick with that word, in like our classified verticals. How do I search for an automotive deal? How do I look for a house? Where do I list my garage sale? Craigslist, Monster, all of those guys played a big part in changing the industry. The great thing I think that came out of that is we needed to learn how to do business differently, how to reach the audience where they wanted to consume it for convenience or efficiency, whatever that may be. That's been the major shift, and staying up with that has been the biggest challenge. But bend in the road isn't the end of the road unless you fail to make the turn. So I feel fortunate that the companies that I've been with have paid attention to how to navigate through some of this that none of us anticipated would change the industry so specifically. I think that used to be the case more so than it is today. I think if you want to be mobile and you want your career to progress with different companies and pick up those different experiences, of course, that's always still a very real possibility. I think now, more so than ever, the way that we structure our staff members, our teams, how we put things together, there are far fewer people in the industry that are qualified for high level executive jobs. So one thing that I think has been the most dramatic shift in this industry, and especially in a career like mine, is that staying with a company, building trust and that loyalty is a little easier to do because there are fewer people that are qualified to step in at a high level in these jobs. So people, if they want, can make a career out of one company or one community if they choose to do that and move all the way through the ranks for sure. I believe wholeheartedly that true journalism is something that we all need in our communities. The newspaper has always, first and foremost been the safeguard of the First Amendment, but secondly, being the watchdog in the community for political reasons, for keeping everything nicely in check and reporting back as the paper of record of any community that we serve in. And it's interesting because as we work with journalists, young journalists that are coming out of the university system or they're kind of dabbling in their first careers, it's a hard gig in the beginning, getting in and trying to figure out exactly how big a role journalism plays in these communities. And sometimes they're not the best paying jobs, but sticking with it and really looking at how to better a product and make it more appealing to the audience that consumes that information is so very, very important. And I would absolutely, I still believe to this day, journalism has its place, and we definitely have, as a community newspaper organization, we definitely have a role today and going into the future. Like I had mentioned before, there just isn't anybody out there that can provide to a local market the type of information that we build every day.